All right, fellas, we're gonna run through book 10 of the Aeneid, Captains Fight and Die. Pretty straightforward title, and you'll see why here shortly. If you haven't read it yet. But yeah, we'll run through just kind of the narrative here, and then probably just hit on any points that Alex or I find particularly interesting. There's a few sections from this that I actually just want to read because they're just really, really good. Um, there isn't as much um, symbolism and uh, metaphysical stuff going on in the background of this. It's really just I think Alex said this in a text to me earlier. It's like it's just violence and more violence. Um, but
Yeah, almost as if Virgil has like laid the foundation, and now he's just like fanning the flames, like because there's if you were to read this just by itself, like the natural response would be like, heck yeah, let's go. But then like, you know, 20 minutes later, day later, whatever, after a short period of time, you're gonna forget about it, wears off. But well, you combine it, especially you're talking the intended audience, Caesar and first century Rome, a little bit before that. But that, like, the actual intended audience, this is the story of their people and their place. He's set all that deep foundation, that deep meaning that is going to be uh, at least significantly more common knowledge than us. Like, they're not having to use Chat GPT. There's like, oh, like this makes these references that we're like, struggling through, like thinking on and like getting a percentage of. And I'm sure there's way more that we're not picking up on this read through. But like they're gonna get that. And so you know, can't speak for Virgil, but it would seem that he's kind of like he's laid that framework. Like, he's done the work to make it kind of stick, and now he's just like whipping his readers up into a frenzy.
yeah,
Uh, yeah,
yeah, I would agree with that. I definitely think that there's a lot of references being made in these chapters, this one especially probably, that we just don't quite get because we aren't contemporaries.
yes,
So many of the men that are killed, that he makes note of being cut down in this chapter. I don't know who those guys are. Like I don't have a reference point for who they are, but I'm sure that the first century Roman people did. Like this was
yeah,
part of their sort of legendarium, and so they know what he's talking about as he's making these references, which I'm sure hits way harder if you're, that first person audience. But
yeah. Even
um
even still, it hits pretty hard. It's good.
yeah,
It's a good chapter.
yeah, it does. So we kind of open up with uh the scene of the gods being gathered in Olympus on Mount Olympus, um, in the throne room of Zeus or Jove, as Virgil calls him. Um, and he basically is like, "Why do you have these people fighting each other? Like I've already kind of laid out what I want to happen, and this wasn't what I called for. Like I didn't want the Italians and the Rutulians fighting." The Trojans here on the shores of Italy. That was not my plan. And like I think that one of the interesting things, so Virgil does this all the time. We talk about it every time we talk about this book, but he makes reference to the fact that Carthage will someday rise up from Aeneas's perspective and unleash hell on Rome. He's like, there's plenty of war coming for the Trojan people and the Italians as they become Rome, but now's not really the time for it. Like, there's no reason to drink more of it than you need to. It's coming. There will be plenty of war in your future. Don't rush to try to get to it early. Um, so interesting point there because it's just once again Virgil kind of referencing his audience and talking about the conflict between Rome and Carthage. But from there, it kind of moves on, and Venus, she's described as golden Venus, at this point in the story, who is the daughter of Jove, um, who is also Aeneas's mother. Um, she sort of replies back with this, like, what other choice do the Trojans have? Like, this is where they've been called. This is the land that they've been told to settle and rule, and they're being attacked. So, what else would you have them do other than fight? Um, and so she kind of gives that reply and then goes, even if they are going to, after all of this time, like all of this struggle, crossing the seas and all of the issues that they've been met with to get here, even if they are going to be killed and overrun at this point, at least let Aeneas get Ascanius out of the fray. At least preserve his life, even if Aeneas is just going to be a nobody. He's just going to sort of fade into history, um, as kind of like a minor character. At least let him do that at peace with his
it,
son.
yeah, she kind of even concedes the fact that, like, if Aeneas isn't going to be Aeneas, like that's fine. Like I'm content with that if that's what it has to be. But give me Ascanius. I think there's something particularly relatable and feminine in what she's doing too. Like, and uh, very very motherly, for better or for worse. Where she's like, no, like I don't want them to die. I want them to come live a long life in peace and obscurity, with me, which I can only imagine that they would not agree to. Like if they were to be brought, if Aeneas and Ascanius were to be brought into the conversation, I don't foresee them being content with that. And we'll kind of like get a little bit of that later on in the chapter with Turnus when he's kind of ripped away from the battle.
Hmm.
Um, a very strong masculine versus feminine response to these types of situations.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Countering her, Juno steps in and her reply is so manipulative and conniving and just like she has been the whole time.
Yeah.
But um yeah, looses her fury, bursting out, why drive me to break my deep silence, to open up my wounds long scarred over and bruit them to the world. Um, she's always the one that's being mistreated. She's always one that's like being slighted somehow, and she's literally just like unleashed hell just a minute ago.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, what? Didn't you just like call forth Electo? Like the
Yeah.
the fury that is like terrifying to all of the other furies, even like just unleashing
Yeah.
carnage and war on everyone. And she's like, oh, why do you have to do this to me all the time? Like, that's the most
Yeah.
conniving.
Victim card maxing.
It's crazy. So,
And I'll try not to do this like throughout the entire chapter, but like my brain is full Rhodesia mode with what else I'm reading, and I do think this is like a worthwhile parallel to make, but routinely throughout the Great Betrayal, Ian Smith uh, calls attention to the fact that like this is the communist playbook. Like this is exactly what they do.
mhm,
They start fights, claim to be the victim, demand some sort of concession. They come to some sort of agreement. The other side will uphold that agreement, and then they will just renege on all their promises, and then repeat the cycle. And so that's how they'll win. They'll take ground, which um, you know clearly, and he's calling this out in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Um, and clearly the seeds for that go back significantly farther, at least to Virgil as he's writing this. He's not just making this up. Like this is stuff that he's able to see. So really probably just goes back at least in some facet to the garden with Eve. Just in you could take it back real far, but yeah, just kind of the same tactic that we face today uh, was faced in 20th century politics and history, and yeah, it just works its way all the way back, and it's the same playbook every time. There's you know two plays. They're running the wing T. We just haven't figured out how to stop them. It's like
Yeah.
we know what's coming. They don't have options, but their one option is apparently very effective.
Yeah. I think you're dealing with here sort of this Western ethos where the one side is primarily concerned with what's good and full of
Yeah.
integrity and character, and the other side is simply there to win. And
Yes.
so when you have someone who wants to maintain their status as like a good person, and then one side who couldn't care any less about that, but is there to win,
Correct.
this is sort of what unfolds. And I think that you see here, this is a good lesson for us in our current, cultural climate and where we live in time and in the world. Like what you see is that Aeneas finally just loses it and starts killing everyone.
Yeah.
And even when, because they do this, like they show up and attack him with horses and chariots until he has them on the ground. And then they're like holding onto his ankles, begging for life. Like, let me go. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
How
The
about
correct
no?
response is
Actually, why don't you give me your throat so I can unleash blood all over your chest? Like, that's 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 his response. Is like, no, we're killing all of you. There's
yes.
no like even towards the end when you get to Mezentius and Lausus and like the son who does this valiant, like brave thing to save his father. Like, no, you're dying. Like,
Yeah.
we're here to kill all of you because I'm here to win. And yes, we would rather be seen as we want to be full of integrity and truth and goodness. But you don't get to play by different rules. Like,
Yes.
we're just gonna kill all of you. And so just something maybe to keep in the back of your head as the Overton window continues to shift. We would be moving closer to Aeneas.
Daily.
So he doesn't abide by Juno's conniving lies and manipulations. Um, anyways, so from there, uh, we have Um, here's the other thing about that. I just one more point on it because I'd written it down in the notes earlier. Juno answers back that when she's defending the Italians and the Rutulians, and she goes, "Doesn't Turnus have the right to defend his homeland and the bride that he was promised?" And so she makes this point that's actually very true, and she uses truth to utterly manipulate the entire situation. Because I think you can tell Juno doesn't actually care about Turnus.
No.
She's not concerned about Turnus. She hates the Trojans, and he is the best weapon at her disposal for trying to foil their plans. She knew at the beginning of the previous chapter that Aeneas was going to sit on the throne and decided that she would rather stir up war and chaos and make this into as long of a drawn out conflict with as much bloodshed as possible, rather than just see him come to his full power and fruition, with ease. She was like, let's make this as hard as possible, actually, just because she's conniving. And now she's using this thing that's very true from Turnus's perspective. Like, doesn't he have the right to defend his homeland and the bride that he was promised? Sure. But like that wasn't his idea. That was your idea. And you were the one that drummed this all up. And you don't actually care about him. And so it's just one more thing where like even when they say true things, you can't let leftist conniving communist people frame narratives because they're always liars. So, anyways, um, so moving from Mount Olympus back in Italy, the Trojans continue to fight to defend their walls from the Rutulian attacks. You had that big battle scene previously where Turnus got inside the walls of the Trojan camp, and it was like a tiger inside the sheepfold, and he is essentially fighting the entire Trojan army on his own and doing pretty well before the captains. I think it's Menesthius and one other guy from the Trojans kind of get the guys rallied back and fight him to the edge of the river where he jumps in. And so now Turnus has returned to his friends, and the war has resumed, and the Rutulians, the Italians, are trying to get inside the Trojan walls, and they're having a hard time, but they're also making progress, and so the Trojans are constantly having to defend the walls and patch things up and hurl down stones to try to get guys back away from the wall in the hopes that Aeneas arrives back soon. At this point, Aeneas has left King Evander's country and picked up some allies along the way. And at this point, he makes another one. He visits and makes a pact with King, I think it's Tarchon, is how you say it, to join him in the war with the Rutulians. And there's not much color to that. It's just that like he meets Tarchon, they make a pact, and Tarchon joins his forces with Aeneas's forces. Um, and then going from there, they set sail to get back around to where the Trojans originally landed and built the camp. And so they're sailing on their way, and there's 30 warships headed to save the Trojan camp. And Virgil goes through and lists all the captains that have joined Aeneas. So another one of those things where you could get really into the details here and talk about each one of those guys if you wanted to, but we're just gonna kind of skim over it. That's who he's talking about there. They're on their way back to the Trojan camp, and in the night, Aeneas is at the tiller of his warship. He's kind of leading the way, and he's visited by his former fleet of ships who have been turned into sea nymphs. So if we remember this, Turnus was going to have all of the ships set on fire and burned in order to keep the Trojans from being able to escape by sea. And there was a plea from Venus to the mother of the gods to take these ships and keep them safe because they're made out of wood that was taken from her sacred grove, Venus's sacred grove on Mount Ida. Um, so it's pretty interesting here. These sea nymphs come back and they find Aeneas, and then they impart to him what is taking place at the Trojan camp because he hasn't heard about it yet. He has no idea that the camp is under siege. This is the first that he's heard of the war that's already, begun. And he's racing to go and try to, uh, join it now at this point. Um, it's hard to tell, but it seems like maybe the sea nymphs actually sort of like propel the ships on faster to get
That
there.
was kind of yeah, it wasn't super clear, but that was kind of how I had read it. They kind of yeah help them find their way and get there in an expedited manner.
Right. So you have the sunrise the following morning, and they are about to make landfall outside the Trojan camp. And the Trojans see him coming, and they regain hope. They see their king and their captain coming to lead them, and they're thrilled. But they can't just sail directly to the camp. There's an entire Etruscan army between the Trojan camp and the fleet that is about to make landfall. And so Turnus turns and sees Aeneas coming and calls for his men to come forth and repel the fleet from reaching the land. And so he's full of like battle fire, like he's ready to go, but he also is somewhat torn whether he should continue to try to hold this siege around the Trojan fort or to devote all of his energy to keeping the Trojan ships from reaching shore. So he's sort of torn there. They end up trying to keep the Trojans from reaching shore and fail pretty miserably at it. Apart from King Tarchon taking a pretty big risk and not coming to shore the way that the rest of the ships did, where he ends up um, basically high centering his boat on a reef, and the reef ends up like in the waves end up breaking the ship apart, and his guys all end up in the water. Apart from that, it seems like the Trojans land pretty successfully and make it to shore and begin to fight. And so now the Rutulians, who previously had the advantage, um, are fighting a two-front war between the Trojan camp and the Trojan fleet that have landed on shore. At this point, we really, for the first time, get to see Aeneas enter into the action, and he reaches shore and immediately starts cutting down enemy soldiers like wheat.
Yeah. Real quick before that, one of the handful of reasons that Turnus is quite possibly the greatest villain ever written. One of his quote as he sees them coming and he realizes that you know they're now kind of fighting a two front war. They've got the Trojans that they were attacking in the camp, and now they have Aeneas coming. So there it would be probably logical to not be super excited about that. Um, but the in this is page I have a different translation, but this is page 218 in mine. But the bold confidence of Turnus never wavered as he quickly took up position on the shore to repel the landing. This is the answer to your prayer, he cried. Now is the time to break them. Brave men have the god of war in their own right arms. Each of you must now think of his own wife and his own home and remember the great deeds which brought glory to your fathers. Let us go down to the sea to meet them while they are still in confusion and finding their feet after landing. Fortune favors the bold. That's his charge to his men.
Mm. I'm telling you, I have a hard time not liking the guy. Like,
Yeah, he's a similar to kind of World War II history. Like the the bad guys are in some ways hard not to like. I don't know if I were to be a Rotulian, I would probably pretty gladly follow Turnus into battle. He's a man of courage, a man worth following. Uh, Generally speaking.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire book. Fortune favors the bold. If you ever see that written on something or printed on a pocket knife or whatever, just know that that's Virgil. So, it's one of those things. Like, this is one similar to not all those who wander are lost, Tolkien's quote about Aragorn, in Bilbo's poem about him. Like, it just gets thrown on stuff all the time and no one ever quotes it and like gives credit to like the fact that Tolkien actually wrote that. This is another one that's just like that. It just gets thrown on stuff all the time and no one ever goes Virgil. Like,
Yeah, Virgil through Turnus.
right, exactly. Yeah, the villain. So, you have, like I said, you have Aeneas Land, and I wanted to read section 420, which is kind of an overarching description of the battle. There's a much more detailed um description of how Aeneas is basically just wiping the floor with everyone. And his main job, like the thing that he says to Achates is just like, make sure I have a spear in my hand. Like, you don't have to worry about fighting. I'm gonna kill everyone. Just make sure I don't run out of spears. Like, because I'm not gonna miss. And true to his word, he is cutting people down. Um, So, section 420, Trojans and Latins struggling to rout each other, seesawing back and forth as they fight it out on Italy's very doorstep, like clashing winds in the vast heavens, bursting forth into battle, matched in spirit and power, no gust surrendering one to another, neither the winds nor the clouds nor the seas. All hangs in the balance, the world gripped in a deadlock. So they clash, the Trojan armies, armies of Latins, foot dug in against foot, man packed against man. It's pretty epic description of any battle, but um his ability to sort of go, this is this is where the attention of the entire world is on this day in history. All of the gods are transfixed on this moment. All of the people of the world are transfixed on this moment because this is, in some sense, the fire that is going to birth Rome. And this is the conflict that is going to bring about the great empire that's going to rule for 1,500 years in the wake of these great men fighting. And what's crazy is that some of the greatest men of history die on this day. It's pretty momentous. So moving on from there, Pallas, so King Evander's son, they're used to him and his men are used to fighting from horseback, and they're sort of in a cramped space where they can't really maneuver and fight from horseback like they're used to. And the Etruscans are beating them in particular pretty badly until Pallas sort of rallies his men and encourages them, and then he one of the things he gives them this stirring, quick speech similar to the one that Turnus gave, but then he also just dives into the fray and is extremely effective when he does. This is his first time into a battle, but clearly a man of considerable skill and toughness and courage, and is cutting people down and wreaking quite a bit of havoc on the enemy until Turnus arrives. And Turnus basically goes, his life belongs to me, so back up. And it's one of those moments too where like Pallas has no business fighting a one-on-one battle with Turnus at this point in his career, right? Like this is his first battle ever. He's a considerably younger man than Turnus, and Turnus is in all reality probably the second baddest dude on the battlefield that day. Um, and Palace has the choice to kind of like cower and not meet the challenge, or just accept that like this might be the end of my days. So be it. And he meets it with courage. He accepts the challenge and steps forth, and the field is somewhat cleared, and it's just Turnus and Pallas who fight it out. And they start by throwing spears, and so Pallas is timing it, throws a spear, and it does actually break Turnus's skin, but that's about the extent of the damage that's done. And then Turnus returns with his spear and immediately kills Pallas. And it's not a close battle. Um, Alex, we were talking about something some time ago. I think we were watching some sort of martial arts video or something, but there's one of the strongest men in the world, world's strongest man guy, um, Martin Licis, and he's learning this very technical, like it's looked like maybe like judo or something like that.
It was judo. Yeah.
And so they're learning how to throw guys off their feet, like get advantage, get a better leverage, and then get a guy off his feet, throw him on the ground. And he's facing off with a guy that is, I'm sure, some sort of like fifth Dan black belt or something crazy. But this man's also a normal sized human being with a normal amount of strength. And Martin Licis is Martin Licis. And so there's no technique at all. He just smashes him because he's just that much bigger and stronger. And
Yeah.
so Alex made the comment that like sometimes strength is a technique. And I think you're sort of running into some of that with guys like Mezentius, Turnus, Aeneas. Not that they're unskilled. It's just that they're that much bigger and more powerful than everyone else.
Yeah, because you see a handful of times in this chapter. And this is one uh, example where you know they don't have like the absolute most precision to sneak a spear around a shield and through a chink of the armor. It goes directly through the shield and then to the breastplate and then out the back of the breastplate, and then blood and life come flowing out of the same hole. Is was a quote at what from one of those instances. Um, So yeah, there's just a an overwhelming force component to it. Um, and we as we tend to do, we could make all sorts of direct applications to physical training, which we can spare that largely here. Like you guys have, if you haven't gotten that point, you're either have never heard us talk or you're not gonna get it. But yeah, it's a just a physical reality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's just bigger and stronger than you. He can just exert more force than you can. Um, and there's an element of like it's not just that he's strong, it's that he's more powerful than you. He's bigger and stronger and faster. And so when he throws a spear, it doesn't matter that your shield is up because it's just going to plow through whatever's in front of it. Um, because because he threw it and he's different than you.
yeah.
And so I think that's like one of those things like underlying basic, same stuff we always talk about. We don't have to go into details about how to do this or anything, but like get better at exerting force. Like,
Yeah.
by any means.
Yes, you will suffice it to say that that is good, and you should want that.
Yeah.
Like you should be in pursuit of that. The specific of how to do that, we can talk about that at a different time. But yeah, you should want to be the guy that can throw the spear through the shield and the breastplate, and to at least have that in your arsenal and not have to rely on being able to have absolute razor precision at all times and get around the shield through the chink in the armor. And that's good. You should want both, but so often one is heralded as skillful and the other one is kind of degraded as, I don't know, brutish or whatever you want to look at it as. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's something that you absolutely want to have and not need,
Yeah. And
or
it's
need.
funny that like I think that's a pretty common like new modern thing to be like,
Yeah,
oh, it's so cool to be the Flash or Spider-Man or whatever character that's like the ninja type character who's like
yes,
small and fast and really smart and like quirky and like sarcastic. And then they
yeah,
tend to be fighting bigger, stronger, dumber opponents.
yeah.
And that tends to be like, these are the good guys and these are what the bad guys look like. And you have these tropes, but I think those are utterly modern because when you look at ancient writing, that's not what they thought at all. They're like,
No, yeah.
they're like, no, this guy's the best because he's bigger and stronger than everyone else. Watch. And when he throws a spear, it doesn't matter if you have your shield up or not. He's still gonna kill you.
Yeah, and whether that's the psyop or that's a result of a psyop, like yeah, it's unnatural to
Yeah, yeah,
not, and not, I don't know, not saying that a guy who's, you know, topped out in their life as an adult at 130 pounds should be like, oh, what I need to be is 270 pounds and just an app. Like, different guys have different skill sets. Yes. But,
sure.
um, yeah, this is not a strong man disrespecting book review.
No, no, it's not. So, Turnus, Turnus kills Pallas and then claims his sword belt and tells the Arcadians, who are Pallas's people, to take word back to King Evander. Um, Before the fight, he had stated that the only regret that Turnus had was that Evander wouldn't be there to see it, which is
Holes.
quite the
Oh,
line. Like,
yeah.
ooh, too
And
bad your
also,
dad's not going to be here to see me kill you.
yeah. Uh, it, and just the fact that everybody is so terrified and in shock that they let him stand there and say that. Yeah, it gives you kind of a good picture. A modern. I feel like we're like a quarter way through the chapter. We're just
Dude,
rambling, but
it's gonna take us forever. It's all right.
real fast story on this, as a modern corollary. This is a this was a Joe Rogan thing that I saw, which obviously not a huge Joe Rogan guy, but he was talking about a skit that he had done, and somebody in the crowd was heckling him. And Dan Henderson, if you guys don't know who Dan Henderson is, look him up, was in the crowd, and he said, he said or did, hey, sit down, and in a fairly calm way, and the guy started to kind of mouth off to him, and from the stage, Joe Rogan goes, "Do you know who that is? That's Dan Henderson." His quote was, "He could hold you down as he's making love to your wife." In his own Joe Rogan language, and and Dan Henderson's response was, "Why would I hold him down when I could just stare him down?" Uh,
Right.
similar type of power, gravitas,
Yeah.
sheer terror
Yeah.
ability.
Turnus walks onto the field and everyone shivers,
Yes,
except for Aeneas.
yes,
I don't know, sweetheart. I'm in the middle of something. Um, I do have to quote, there's one thing that's said right before Pallas and Turnus fight, and Pallas appeals to the gods, and he actually appeals to Hercules and like prays to him. And Jove uh sees this taking place and says, each man has his day, and the time of life is brief for all and never comes again. But to lengthen out one's fame with action, that's the work of courage. And it
yes,
might be one of my favorite quotes in the entire book.
yeah. It's good. I think it's even better in the context of this is Jove telling this to Hercules, who's just weeping over, like, there's nothing that he can do to save Pallas, even though he wants to, and so you know, uh, Jove is consoling, um, kind of the paragon of the guy that exhibits these virtues, maybe better than anyone in the sort of Greek canon. It's hard to kind of put anyone up against Hercules.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that even just makes the quote itself and the context even richer,
Hmm.
more powerful.
He actually says to him that he also lost a son under Troy's high walls. Like
Yes,
he's gone through this before. Like he's watched his son die because he acted courageously and lost. Um, and then he also sort of like throws out there, you could just there's all of this foreshadowing about the fact that like Turnus is not going to survive this story. And he goes, for Turnus too, his own fate calls, and the man has reached the end of his days on earth. And
yes,
like he's bound for defeat. He just doesn't really quite know it yet. And so even though he is wreaking havoc and lives are being taken by his sword, even he is on his way to the grave. One of the other men later in this actually in this chapter, like he's killed him and he's about to remove his spear, and the guy's, taking his last breaths. And basically he's like, don't gloat over me. He was like, you're gonna you're gonna be laying dead on this same field soon enough. And like
yeah,
I think there's something to the kind of leader that Aeneas is, where his men, even in their dying breath, are like, "You're so screwed."
yeah,
Like your 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 clock is ticking down, my friend. Like, yeah, you just beat me, but he's coming, and
yeah.
you're not beating him. And so like finding a way to, like if you're going to be a leader of men, like inspiring this kind of confidence in your guys, I think it's something that is a very high and worthy cause. Like it's worth putting a lot of effort into inspiring your guys in this way.
Yeah, whatever you've been set over, whether it's so, some objectively massive and impressive role of authority or not, like you're um, do the people who you have authority over look at you like Aeneas's men look at Aeneas, and if not, what do you need to do to close that gap?
Hmm. Okay, try to move on here. We're not gonna be able to get through all this. Um, so at this point, Aeneas responds to Pallas's death with utter rage. He's already been a force moving across the battlefield, but now things escalate even further, and he is on an absolute rampage. Um, So much slaughter, the Trojan commander spreads throughout the plain like a stream in spate or a black tornado storming on till at last the young Ascanius and his troops break free and put the camp behind. The great blockade is over. And so the death of Pallas is this thing that spurs Aeneas to basically rout the Rutulian army to some degree, where the siege breaks and the Trojans are able to get out of the camp and come kind of join forces with the fleet that showed up because Aeneas is such an incredible force of violence on the enemy, um, like a black tornado that's moving across the battlefield. Pretty pretty wild. Um, at this point, Jove allows Juno to take Turnus from the battle to save his life, if only for a short time. So we got more of this foreshadowing here. Jove and Juno are watching as Venus aids the Trojans in this battle, and the writing is on the wall. Like Aeneas is eventually going to come face to face with Turnus, and this is going to come to a conclusion. And we already know which way everything is going to fall. And so once again, Juno draws things out and she goes down and actually creates a phantom that looks like Aeneas and walks it in front of Turnus and he chases it. He throws a spear and it flees. And so he's like feels this hope rise in his chest just for a second, which makes you think that even he, like in all of his like dauntlessness, understands that he's going to fight a man that's different than all of the other men. Like
Yes.
even he knows that he's there's a good chance he doesn't leave with his life. And so he throws a spear and Aeneas flees. And then he has this hope rise in his chest and Aeneas runs and jumps on it. Well, Aeneas Phantom runs and jumps on a ship and Turnus follows it. And then Juno immediately pushes that boat out to sea and strands Turnus out at sea so that he cannot be killed by Aeneas, basically. She causes him to flee. I do think once again, like we just keep harping on this, but like the integrity in the character of Turnus is shown again there, where he's like, what could be worse than this? I would much rather die than be thought of by all of my men as a coward. They're back there dying, facing the sword that I need to go face, and you have me out here. Um, if this is going to be the case, just kill me now. Like I would rather be the man that dies courageously than the man who flees and runs and is thought of forever as a coward.
Yeah.
So he's trapped out on the ship, um, and Aeneas is continuing to cut down the Etruscan army, looking for Turnus as he goes. And this is when giant Mezentius enters the fray in a more detailed way. So he was one of the king's good friend of Turnus's that joined Turnus in attacking the Trojans. He's known for this line of crimes against his own people. So pretty terrible guy. Um, and a man who's just always been in the situation where he's like, I just have a bigger stick than you do, but a tyrant about it. And so has done terrible things even to his own people. And
Is he not the one that uh Evander and the Arcadians that's one of the reasons why they're marching to war with Aeneas or sailing to war with Aeneas is to exact revenge on him. In that was that the last book or the book before? But
one of the
when
last two.
Aeneas,
Yeah.
yeah, when Aeneas and Evander are talking, they sort of go into some of his crimes, and one of the things that he would do is take a prisoner and tie them hand to hand, foot to foot with a corpse, and then let them starve slash rot together. Like so, like this is like the his sort of uh, legacy that he's leaving a man of great power, but bankrupt morals. Like he can do whatever he wants. What he does is just objectively awful.
Evil. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. Terrible, terrible guy, terrible king. Um, but incredible warrior.
yes,
And so he's moving across the battlefield and he goes on a bit of a rampage and is killing many Trojans until Aeneas crosses his path. And then things change dramatically. Um, from a distance, once again, he throws a spear and it pierces through the rawhide of Mezentius's shield and buries in his groin, is the way he describes it, but basically in his thigh. And he pulls his sword. Aeneas is about to cut him down, and Mezentius's son, Lausus, steps in at the very last second and parries the blow that was going to kill Mezentius. And at this point, the Rutulians kind of retaliate with a bunch of spear throws, and so Aeneas has to cover up with his shield and um, fight off the spear throws, but also fight off Lausus. And in that period of time, they're able to pull Mezentius out and get him out of harm's way, which is just bizarre. Like you have this one guy who's a big enough force to kill not only this other guy who's a monster, but also to put basically the entire army of the Italians like under threat to the point where they're like having to use cover fire to, to keep him pinned down so that he doesn't kill everybody. Um, the problem is that you have this uh like flurry, and things escalate, and Virgil describes it similar to like a cloud burst, like a thunderstorm rolls in and you have to take cover for a little bit, but then it sort of, it runs its course and wears itself out and moves on. And the same thing happens here as Aeneas is waiting for the Rutulian army to sort of like have to regroup after this onslaught that they put on him. He simply weathers the storm, and then as soon as things start to subside, he stands up, and Lausus doesn't live out the day. Um, he kills him, and it's an interesting scene because Virgil gives a lot of credit and gives a lot of glory to Lausus for his bravery in that act. He does that beforehand, and then he describes Aeneas killing Lausus, and then Aeneas himself, uh, sort of it kind of comes out of his battle rage and acknowledges the bravery and courage of Lausus, similar to the thing that happened earlier. So you had Turnus kill Pallas, so the Turnus is the greatest warrior of the Rutulians, and then you have Pallas, who's a great warrior, but he's also, really green. He's brand new to this. And you have this counterpart thing taking place now, where Aeneas, who is the greatest warrior on the battlefield, is fighting a young man who doesn't have any business crossing swords with him. I think that juxtaposition actually is really good. This is one of those few times in the book where you really see the villainy of Turnus and the heroic nature of Aeneas, and the way that Turnus is like, I wish your dad was here so he could see me kill you. And he's just like revels in it, in his own glory. And whereas Aeneas, um, not in this like gay, I'm so humble way, but rather in like I honor you for the courage that you displayed. At least you will go down as having been killed by me,
yeah,
which is a big deal. So yeah, I think that's an important sort of like mirroring of those two characters that takes place right there. Um, After this, Mezentius is over by the river. He's trying to recover from this wound that he took when Aeneas hit him with a spear, and he hears that his son Lausus is dead. and he calls his horse, his war horse over, mounts the horse. Really interesting scene there with him and the war horse. And like,
Yeah.
if we're gonna go, then we're gonna go together because I don't know that you could bear the the change of having to be ridden and commanded by another man, much less a
Yeah.
Trojan.
Yeah, like basically none of his men were worthy. Like nobody else could handle the horse, and the horse wouldn't do well under Trojan rule.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it was. Um,
We could probably pull on that thread for a very long time. We don't
oh
I don't
yeah,
know if
and I'm
we
sure
have
that
to, but
Virgil had something like very specific that he was getting at with that, like because it is kind of like jarring a little bit as you read it. Like, hold on, wait, what? Why are we talking about this guy's horse?
yeah.
All of a sudden, like there are a lot of horses on this battlefield. A lot of them have done good, bad, and different. Like this is the only time we get like a specific reference to a horse to
And
uh,
it's named.
Rebus.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rebus, and but so yeah, I'm sure Virgil's getting at something that I'm not quite understanding. At least at this point, I probably will go in and kind of look, do a little bit of research at this point because I'm curious. Uh, but yeah, very clearly, if nothing else, Mazentius has a strong bond with this horse that's taken him and helped him, acquire an empire. Um, and he, rides it in a battle with I guess as much success as you have against Aeneas. He kind of seems to have him on his heels a little bit, and he's mounted on a massive war horse throwing spears, and Aeneas is on foot. Um, and then as we had just talked about, it's good to be the type of man who's physically capable of uh, defeat, blowing through all your best defenses. What Aeneas does is takes his spear and throws it between the temples of a horse on the run. So, he's clearly quite capable of exhibiting both ends of that spectrum. That's not something that's easy to do
Yeah.
at all. That's quite the feat.
Yeah. It's one of the more impressive scenes in it is like, I'm tired of you riding around me on this horse throwing spears. So he just kills his horse and in doing so, like crushes the man because the horse falls on the guy that's attacking him. And he is sort of pinned down
Yeah,
before before he's able to do this. And then he rises up and throws a spear and it goes through the head, like throws a spear through the head of a horse, first of all.
there's still some serious brute force
There's
there, but
there's
it,
some power being exerted. But the horse rears back and then falls on Mazentius, and Mazentius's body is crushed. And there's a short exchange between Mazentius and Aeneas before Aeneas uh, cuts his throat. And yeah, I think once again, I think it's important to bring up like we've hammered on the fact that like being able to produce and exert tremendous force is what makes you dangerous. Like, and being dangerous is good. And so if you're going to be dangerous, figure out how to exert more force. Um,
yeah,
but then the other thing is like sometimes the good guys have to just like throw away the reins and just like no governor, like full tilt, pedal to the floor, violence. Like that sometimes violence is the answer. And in
yes.
this particular scene, like you have the hero of the entire story killing numerous people with a sword or with a spear, and mercilessly. Like he's not the only point that gives him any pause is the young man, is Lausus.
Yeah.
And he honors him, but he also killed him. Like he kills him and then he honors him and then he goes and kills his dad.
Yeah, and when as he's honoring him, he's not apologizing. There's no real like, oh, I'm so terribly sorry.
There's
My
not
heart
even
is grieved by the fact that I had to kill you. It's uh
Yeah.
Yeah,
He doesn't like complain about and like wish and hope for different circumstances and maybe we could have been friends in a different scenario or some gay nonsense. Like, no, you're a brave man. Uh, glad that your name will live on through the fact that you died at my sword. And like, congrats. At least I got to kill you and not some other scrub. Like
yeah,
that's his concession. Is like you were an honorable and courageous man. Congrats. You got killed by me. Good for you.
yeah.
Um, I think that level of unapologetic conviction and action. I don't know how we get the West back. I don't know how we move towards some sort of positive vision for a Western people without that. I don't to quote like the guys on Twitter right now, but like you're not voting your way out of this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to at least have the will to do that. This is kind of the end extreme uh, of that continuum,
Hmm.
which you know it's the extreme for a reason, but also like it could be just the reality. But even the 10 steps before that, like uh, you don't just lay down until it's time to go into a frenzy and kill everybody. Like you're you're not really gonna wonder who those guys are when that day comes. Like you're gonna know by previous actions and in comparatively very easy minor scenarios where no blood is shed, maybe voices aren't even raised. Be like, okay, this is a guy that when the time comes, he's got it. This is a guy that doesn't.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so at this point, it's kind of a self-selection process. I think a lot of people are kind of feeling out, like, okay, you know, everybody can, it's easy to say things. It's really easy to say things when it's, you got a good night's sleep and you well fed and you're in the air conditioning and like I'll go on the list, but okay, what are the micro examples of being willing and able to put an entire army on its heels with your sword and spear and just slit the throats of everybody who stands in your way. Um, and hopefully, uh, we don't get to that point, but
Yeah.
if we do, it's good to know where you're at in your
Yeah,
head, what
for
you're,
sure.
and then also know where the guys surrounding you are at, and who's going to be there and who's not going to be there.
That's an extremely important question.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think it starts with you for sure. Like run this scenario out to its pinnacle. Um, escalate it as far as you possibly can in your own head and go, okay, well, do my convictions hold up under that much weight? Um, it's a good question to ask. The next thing is if you can answer that affirmatively and not hesitate, then the next question is, well, what about the men around me? Do they also possess this kind of conviction? Or at least close to it? Because I think you're going to have, different guys to play different roles. But
yeah. What's I don't remember who said it, but out of a 100 men in battle, 90 aren't supposed to be there. Eight are, or no,
yeah, 10.
nine, 10 are the men who will win the fight, and there's one who's going to actually bring everybody home.
Yeah,
And so you're not there. There's only one Aeneas for a reason. Not you know, not everybody is Aeneas, but you know, also not everybody has to have made the choice to abandon the trip before they got to Italy.
right. Exactly. It's a perfect example.
Yeah,
Like, he's got a bunch of men who are committed to him. They're by his side. They're there to win, to complete the mission, but there's still only one of him. And so he also, while he is the one with the most conviction, he is not the only one with any conviction. And so if you look around and go, I don't have anyone around me that feels the same way that I do about these things, Um, Either start working on some people, sending them some podcasts, giving them some books to read, having some discussions, or figure out a way to get around more guys that are like you. I think is extremely important. So
Yeah.
cool. I think we can probably wrap it up right now. Um, we can do it right here, and then we'll see you guys for book 11 in a couple weeks.
Indeed, getting close. Almost wrapped up.
2 chapters left.
Indeed.
All right, fellas.